So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those who are joining online and are here in person. My name is Megs Wacha, and I am the Scholarly Communications Officer at the United Nations Dag Hammarskjöld Library. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the second day of the fourth United Nations Open Science and Open Scholarship Conference. Thank you so much for being here today. Today's programming is organized under the theme of Removing Barriers to Knowledge, Open Infrastructure, and the Future of Scientific Access. The legal, technical, and social infrastructures of open science, the policies, and people. This is what shapes how the practices of open science implement or don't the values of open science. And so I'm very much looking forward to the day ahead, and I hope you are as well. To begin, we have a wonderful policy panel in front of us, moderated by Dr. Bregt Saenen, who serves as the Senior Policy Officer for Open Science at Science Europe. With extensive experience in membership and policy organizations, he has held roles of the European University Association, the European Commission, Solidar, and the EU Office of the International Labour Organization. Dr. Saenen earned his doctorate in EU Studies and a Master of Science in EU Studies from Ghent University in Belgium, where he also completed a Bachelor and Master of Arts in History. Additionally, he was a visiting researcher at New York University in the United States. So, Bregt, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Megs, for that great introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is, as you heard, Bregt Saenen, Senior Policy Officer at Science Europe, representing public funding bodies and research performers across Europe. And it's my pleasure to continue the conversation today after what I felt was an incredibly good first day, great discussion yesterday. And we're going to try and continue that today and tomorrow. I want to thank the UN Library, Panos, Megs, and their partners for organizing this conference. And I want to thank them to create this space for us to come together, discuss open science from a global perspective. We're coming here together from all different continents, except, as Thanos mentioned, Antarctica. And I find it very telling that this is one of several of those spaces that is emerging for the open science community to come together and have a global conversation. We're here in October in Japan right now for this one. Pretty soon, in February next year, the Global Summit on Diamond Open Access will be coming to India to continue the conversation at its third edition. Not too long after that, in May, we're off to Bangkok for the Global Research Council, where they'll be discussing open science and sustainability. The point that I'm making is this is part of a series of global conversations where this community is coming together and discussing these issues from a real global perspective. And we're very thankful for the opportunity to be here and have that conversation. The panel today, the panel to start today, is Policy Pathways for Open Science as a Global Public Good. This panel is going to be looking at a small piece of the puzzle, the policy dimension of open science, how policy networks, policy frameworks can unlock open science as a contributor to the scientific enterprise, and how it can help science contribute to society. I want to just very briefly, before I go to the speakers, linger on that word frameworks, because for me, as I was preparing this panel and the moderation, I think policy frameworks was key. It indicates so clearly that we are not talking a single policy developing at a single level. We're talking about a framework of policies across different levels: global, regional, national, institutional. So what we're talking about in this panel and in this conversation is how those policies can align, how they can align, work together to support the initiatives coming from the community and make sure that they work for everyone. That being said, by means of introduction, it is my pleasure to now start introducing the speakers, each of which make great contributions to those policy frameworks and are working to develop and align them further. And I'm very honored to introduce our first speaker, who is joining us online. There she is, Professor Dr. Phoebe Koundouri, who is professor at the School of Economics, Athens University of Economics and Business, visiting professor at the Department of Earth Sciences, University of Cambridge, and senior research fellow at Peterhouse, also University of Cambridge. She is the co-chair of the independent group of scientists for the Global Sustainable Development Report, where the next edition is coming out in 2027, now being prepared. And it's this report, the Global Sustainable Development Report, that is the foremost UN publication aiming to strengthen the science policy interface. So I believe, Professor Koundouri, you are perfect to speak on this panel and speak to the developing policy framework of open science. It's my pleasure to give you the floor. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's really a very important a conference and an important theme that we are looking at. So I've been, throughout the 30 years of my career, I have been working on interdisciplinary systems of science that allow us to bring together the economy, the society, but also nature, in order to identify interactions between them that allow an understanding deep enough that shapes that can be the basis, the underpinnings of shaping the transition to sustainability. And I'm saying that because I'm going to claim in this intervention I'm going to claim in this intervention that it is open science and digital infrastructures that are very crucial in supporting this transition to sustainability. We know that currently we are faced with this multi-crisis. We have slow economic growth, very low pace of economic growth, which is problematic. We have inflationary pressures. We have increasing inequalities across the globe. We have food insecurity, water insecurity, energy insecurity. We have the climate crisis, the biodiversity collapse. We have increasing population, geopolitical pressures. And we decided in 2015, after an unprecedented achievement of 193 countries signing one common agenda, a very complex and but holistic and integrated agenda that will be our manual for escaping this crisis. And this agenda is the Agenda 2030 of the UN, with 17 goals, 169 targets within them, and among these 17 goals, we have 4 focused on the environment and ecosystems, 8 focused on society, the cohesion of society, 4 on the economy, and the last goal, collaboration for the goals. Within this agenda, we don't have an explicit goal for AI, but none of these sustainable goals can, in our days, be achieved without open science, because it's a very science-hectic agenda, and none can be achieved without digitalization, and it can be enabled by technologies such as AI. So it's a crucially important agenda connected to digitalization, connected to open science. I lead an Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation on Aiphoria, on sustainability, bringing together more than 200 researchers working exactly on innovative systems for sustainable interaction between nature, society, and economy. And we have a footprint in more than 120 countries with more than 100 big multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder joint projects with many universities and research centers. And I think is this very vivid activity on the research and innovation space, but also on the science policy space that gave me the chance to co-chair the Global Sustainable Development Report of the United Nations. This is a report written by 15 independent a group of 15 independent scientists, and I have the honor and pleasure to chair this group. It's a report that is global and an assessment of assessments. And this one, the 2027 report, is going to be particularly important because it is the last one before the 2030 deadline. So what is my stake on this? I don't know if you can see my slides now. Oh, you can see my slides. Okay,
Yes, they've come up meanwhile.
okay, that's good. Okay, so I'll put them in a slideshow. So my take on this agenda is that the SDGs, and this is what would be my focus in my contribution to this report. The SDGs represent a brilliant and comprehensive framework for transformation. They are science-based, they are quite accurate, they are inclusive, they are holistic and integrated like our transformations should be. And we also know the good news is that we have the science, the technology, the policies, some more developed than others in different regions of the world. We even have the financial resources if we are clever enough to blend private and public finance and streamline finance where it is needed rather than leaving it sitting in savings account. So what is missing? Well, we are missing accountability and we are missing an implementation at scale. We need to scale up our success stories, but we need to accelerate the scaling up by explicit institutional mechanisms dedicated to implementing the SDGs. If you think about it, we have the UN Environmental Program and we have an explicit implementation structure where we have the regional hubs, they have their budgets, they have their investments, they go about implementing their investments. In SDGs, we don't have that. We don't have an operational structure that is capable of aligning global efforts, ensuring effective coordination, and delivering results on the ground. So we need to implement such a structure, design and implement such a structure so that we can identify the channels through which technology transfer, financial flows, and capacity building are going to be diffused across the world in the global south, in the global north, and accelerate implementation. And here, I'm going to propose very briefly 3 major steps that need to be the building blocks of this implementation diffusion. The first one is continuous monitoring and assessment. Continuous monitoring and assessment with regards to our progress in implementing the SDGs. And we have reports for this. We have the UN report that is coming out every year. We have the Sustainable Development Report of UNSDSN, a global network of universities and research centers that I work very closely with, again, with a report every year. Now, and this continuous monitoring and assessment is crucial because it gives you an explicit identification of where you are, your initial conditions. You need to know where you are in order to design the pathways for the future. And here, science is of course crucial because these measurements are frameworks of KPIs. And open science is crucial because the more information you have for science for measuring these KPIs, the more accurate these KPIs will be. And of course, digitalization and AI are of course crucial because nowadays the availability of data, the availability of satellite data, of in-situ data, of drone data, the availability of digital spaces to gather data, to analyze data, to have the ability for big data analytics is all connected to this ability of openness, of transferability, of interoperability of data. And this ability is enabled by frameworks of policies, the European frameworks, the global frameworks of policies that try to open science, try to have open data, and try to make this data usable for such big initiatives. The second step that I am suggesting that is needed is based on your initial conditions and based on the policies that you have in terms of targets, the SDGs, the translation of SDGs into explicit policy frameworks, you need to design your transformative pathways for implementation. And this design happens between the science-based and the stakeholders at co-design space. One example of this is the Global Climate Hub that I am chairing under SDSN and is working closely with UNFCCC, where we have 3 layers of interaction. This is a perfect example where science meets open science, and open science means digitalization, and all 3 meets stakeholder co-design and communication. So this functions in 3 layers, and the aim is to move to design explicit pathways, mathematical pathways in terms of the modeling in order to reach the goals, the SDGs, the European Green Deal goals, which are a translation of the SDGs, but also goals across different countries in the world, different regions in the world. We work in all countries. And the idea is that the first layer, the green layer, is an interdisciplinary mathematical modeling that brings together the climate system, the energy system, the transport system, the land use system, the marine system, the health system, the innovation system, integrates them and identifies every year what each country should change in order to achieve climate neutrality and climate resilience, and then embeds this needs to do, the investments that need to do, the governance transformation that one needs to do, the socioeconomic transformation into finance systems in order to answer the question how you are going to pay for all these investments and transformations. And this mathematical layer is not isolated from stakeholders. And the ability to do the mathematical layer is due to open science and open data and digital platforms and AI, because all this framework, the interdisciplinary framework, is aided by all of this, but also the ability to co-design with the stakeholders is aided by the openness of science, the openness of data, digitalization, bringing together all the different voices to co-design these mathematical pathways that are science-based, but they need to be enhanced by the stakeholders The stakeholders need to be shareholders of the transformation because they are the ones that are going to implement. And at the end of the day, you have a digital platform that brings together all the data.
Professor Koundouri, just to interrupt, I'm getting the signal quite
Okay,
insistently that we have to wrap up this presentation, please.
Absolutely. Give me half a minute. And a digital platform that brings all the data, all the models, and all the tools for implementation to everybody in an open access phase. So here, what we have the SDGs as a goal. We have policy frameworks that translated the SDGs into explicit laws and regulations. One good example is the one that you see on your screen, the European Green Deal, 150 laws and regulations, including green, digital, and industrial. And then we have the openness of the science and digitalization and AI facilitating the explicit identification of the implementable pathways for everybody to be part of the design of these pathways and everybody to be shareholders in the actual implementation, the implementation that we are missing. And in closing, let me just say that one important element that is also enabled with science is the important element of capacity building. In order to implement all these complex transformations, systemic transformations that bring together nature, society, and economy, which is what the SDGs are about, you need capacity in the labor market, you need capacity in all stakeholders, the politicians, the policymakers, the financiers, the civil society, the businesses, the technology developers. And capacity can be greatly enhanced by digitalization, by open access courses, by the communication that open science, open data, and open access to education enables. And of course, it can bring huge enabling capacity within the global south, where resources are yet to flow to a necessary level. I'll stop here. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for your presentation. Yes, little applause. Clearly, a lot more work ahead of us there with open science, hopefully able to accelerate that work. Time is slipping away from us, so I'm going to go straight to our second speaker of today, Dr. Yensi Flores-Bueso, Marie Skłodowska-Curie postdoctoral fellow at the University of College Cork and University of Washington, co-chair of the Global Young Academy, which is very nicely represented here in the room, and also a member of the same independent group of scientists preparing the Global Sustainable Development Report and a member of the UN Scientific Advisory Board. It's the UN Scientific Advisory Board that only last month came out with, I felt, a very strong statement on open science. So I am delighted to give you the floor, give us more of an insight into that report and all the other work that you're doing in this space. Please, the floor is all yours.
Great, thank you, Brett. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. On behalf of the UN Secretary General Scientific Advisory Board, I will share today how, through a recent statement, the board has envisioning strengthening open science as a global public good, and how this connects to policy and practice. So to start with, the Scientific Advisory Board is an independent body comprising a diverse group of leading scientists and UN science leaders with extensive experience connecting expertise across science, technology, ethics, governance, and sustainable development. Beyond the individual members, the board brings together a network of scientific institutions that reflect the UN's values of diversity across regions, languages, and generations. This ensures that the work done by the board is grounded on different knowledge systems and in regional realities. So the GYA, the Global Young Academy, is a proud member of the Scientific Advisory Board, and the Global Young Academy unites early career researchers from 103 countries worldwide. And also connects through 70 national young academies, almost 70 national young academies that exist. Through the GYA, the board reaches young scientists working on the ground, those closest to the realities of different research systems, and helps ensure that the UN system advice is informed by a diversity of perspectives, experiences, and regional contexts. So in this way, we help advise the UN leadership on emerging scientific breakthroughs. We identify how harness their benefits while mitigating potential risks. We strengthen the UN's capacity to anticipate and adapt to the rapidly changing scientific landscape so that science can become a tool for people, planet, and prosperity. Now, to translate science into policy insights, we produce concise science briefs that connect science advices with the UN agenda, such as climate, health, and digital governance. Also central to the work of the board, is strengthening trust in science. So we work on this topic through several initiatives. Like, for example, we released a statement in Trust in Science, and we organize events engaging different stakeholders like young scientists or diplomats in conversation about trust in science. We're also co-producing, working on international workshops to train about the scientific process. So now, why open science? Well, science is a global human enterprise, a framework of how we understand reality and advance society, and it should benefit and include all of us. So during the COVID-19 pandemic response, we could see how open science could, through rapid data sharing and international collaboration, enable vaccine design in a matter of months, advancing scientific progress immensely. So, and the Scientific Advisory Board recognized an urgent need to reform science as a global public good, as it supports the 3 pillars of the UN. It fosters international collaboration and trust, through shared knowledge. It upholds the human right for all people to participate and benefit from science. And it accelerates the progress toward the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. Ultimately, this altogether strengthens multilateralism through efficient, effective, and evidence-based decision-making. So the statement drew on experience, strong experience of the International Science Council and diverse perspectives provided by the Global Young Academy. And here we based it on the UNESCO recommendations and the Global Digital Compact, and centered this statement in advancing science as a global public good. Among the key actions, we call on member states to accelerate implementation of the UNESCO recommendations and related commitments, and to embed open science in their national agendas and strategies. Within the UN system, we urge agencies to advance shared infrastructure, open data models, and to make openness part of the UN reform itself. For decision makers more broadly, we identify 5 levers of change: capacity, access, incentives, inclusion, and investment. Together, these define how open science can move from principle to policy by reforming research assessment, ensuring equitable access, and investing in skill and infrastructure, especially in the Global South. Altogether, this aims to embed open science across systems to strengthen evidence-informed multilateralism, foster trust and accountability, and ensure that everyone can participate in and benefit from science. Now, to translate openness into policy, we must better connect science to decision-making. First, we must strengthen the science policy interface, where researchers, especially early career researchers, need clear paths into policy making so that the decisions are informed by those who produce the knowledge. We need to reframe open science as a shared agency, because open science is about more than access. It's also about reshaping the culture of research so that knowledge can be co-produced, shared, and collective. We must support the implementation through regional networks and infrastructures that strengthen capacity, especially in the Global South. So we have strong frameworks in place. Now we need mechanisms that translate them into funding infrastructure and incentives, turning principles into practice and building agency. Because when openness builds agency, it empowers us all. That's how science can become a genuine global public good. So together we can advance open science and transform scientific knowledge into shared global resources, supporting policymakers and communities worldwide to address the greatest challenges of our time. Thank you very much, and I look forward for the discussion.
Thank you so much. We do have a third speaker on this panel, but unfortunately he is a little bit delayed. I'm really hoping for a scene from a movie where now the doors fly open and he rushes in. Is that happening? Not yet, but it will. We're hoping for it. That does give us an opportunity to give it to the audience. I imagine we can have a bit of a Q&A among us. We've had two amazing presentations about these policy frameworks, how they're developing. So please, do people have questions for our panelists? The microphone is up here for anyone who wishes to come up and ask the first question of the day. It was all very clear.
Maybe,
I do have... Yes,
sorry.
please.
This is Phoebe from
Yes.
virtually. Maybe it makes sense to highlight Open Air, which is the Open Science Initiative of Europe, as a very important and successful initiative that allows at least the European area, without excluding, of course, anyone, to make science open. And this is a digital infrastructure that has hubs across Europe and enables all scientific research to become open access between all researchers, but all other stakeholders. And what is important that incentivizes the vivid use of this infrastructure is that any project that is paid by taxpayers' money, any research project under the horizon of DG Research and Innovation has to make available their data, their results, their digital tools through this platform. This initiative that is almost a 15-year initiative, and I'm proud to say that is led by Athena Research Center in Greece, where I'm also affiliated and lead the Sustainable Development Unit, has transformed science in Europe, but it's also transformed any policy implementation that is science hectic. And I think it's a flagship example of how increased digitalization combined with open science can enable. It is a crucially enabling tool for transformative policies to be implemented and to be guided by science and to allow engagement by everybody who is digitally educated. And then it's the issue, of course, what happens in countries, mostly in the global south, where digital investments are not so diffused, digital skills are not so supported, and how we can expand the access of everybody to this information through digital education, but also through education in general.
Thank you. I really like some of the things that you've mentioned, and especially also I think the reference you made to this has to also be incentivized. We can build the infrastructures. It has to be incentivized. We have to go into depth of how do we want academia and the research culture to look like. That is quite a comprehensive ambition. I think, Yensi, you in your presentation are also referring to this in, so, well, it's not just about access, it's about the culture we're shaping. It's what values do we want to build a research culture on? And that is obviously the great promise of open science. So I'm trying to make a couple of connections here, but meanwhile, mercifully, we have a couple of questions. So please, sir.
So good morning. I'm Mitsunobu Kano, a professor in Okayama University, but also recently appointed as the advisor to UNESCO's International Basic Science Program. From the discussion today and yesterday, I had the notion that to have a collective achievement by people through open science would be very powerful to solve the international issues. However, we are living in the academia, which is based on the individualism more. If you wish to get your jobs, at least, you may need to show what are your achievements. So how we can do or balance this way of thinking with this kind of collectivism way of thinking, which is needed in realizing the open science way of thinking. I was really wondering how we can deal with it. Actually, Asian countries are having the collectivism, but also Western countries are more based on the individualisms. So we may need to think about how we can balance between them. Thanks.
A great question, and I think a great reminder. My panelists are nodding immediately. A great reminder on a policy panel that as we're developing these policies and talking about transformation and transition, we are still dealing with people making their career in the current system. So do either of my panelists want to just briefly give their thoughts on this? Yensi, please.
Thank you for that question. So yes, I agree. We're centered on individual career progression and achievement in competition and being better one than the other and like that. And I think that it requires a cultural change first on how we assess researchers, and what we value in science. If we start valuing, science as something that is done by teams, something that is achieved only through teams that have different strengths, because as a friend told me, you don't have a good football team if you have only excellent quarterbacks. Then you can get a team do a very good job, in a project specific. And for that, we have to value different talents and different kind of strengths in researchers. So for overall, in this case, we need to change the culture of what we value in science and how do we want to incentivize researchers to behave. What incentives do we want when we evaluate researchers? What are we promoting? Because at the end of the day, what we evaluate, it's sought after, and what we incentivize will drive the culture at the end. And it's, I think, both a top-down approach and bottom-up, so we have to raise awareness from the bottom that this is something that we need to work on, but also we have to deliver the policies that will promote this also. Thank you.
So let's link these kind of messages through our channels. Thank you.
Phoebe, I'm also looking at you if you would like to add something.
Yes, whenever I present my work and I showcase this open access digital infrastructure for transformation that includes all the data, all the models, all the tools, and it also includes provision of seminars to enable as many researchers and other stakeholders to use part of this. Sometimes people tell me, Phoebe, science is a competition. You cannot expect everybody to make available their data and their models, and how, if they make everything a public good, how are they going to excel? And my answer is that I don't know of any scientist, at least in the space of applied sciences, that could be the case in philosophy. But in the case of applied sciences, I don't know any scientist that could excel and flourish without a big team. Most of the Nobels nowadays are given to 2 or 3 people. The European Research Council, which is our flagship research funding agency, has recently introduced the Synergy Grant to bring together researchers and disciplines to solve a cutting-edge problem with cutting-edge science. And even nowadays, and even in the Western culture, promotions are given based on your ability as a researcher, yes, to publish, but also to create an ecosystem of PhDs and postdocs and new professors that can follow, that can continue your legacy, but not just your legacy, continue the work in the research space that you are working. So it is science, it is about ecosystems that work together. And nowadays, by definition, it has to be an ecosystem. Why? Because all the problems that we are facing, almost all the problems, are interdisciplinary. So we need interdisciplinary teams to solve them. So collaboration and openness is an acceleration to scientific success. And of course, this scientific success is given back to the society and supports the welfare of society and not the other way around.
Thank you for those comments. We have another question waiting for us.
Hello, I'm Oscar Guerrero from the Global Young Academy in Mexico. And just a quick callback to frameworks that you were talking about how it's not just one policy that we need to change. So in the sense that if we implement open science and we just open everything, right now there's no incentive to actually share all our data and share everything. We cannot just share everything right now, but we can if we change alongside the way we share our information, we change the incentives so that there's an incentive to actually do that kind of sharing. For my question, it was more in the sense of what was talked about yesterday on the indigenous people's side, where they're asking for not just fair, but also care. And are there any now, if you heard about this kind of thing, do you think about implementing this kind of thinking in maybe the advisory board or in the next recommendations or reports on this kind of open science, what we want for open science, not just share, yes, we want it to be open, but maybe have a little bit of thinking about how it affects people before actually implementing it.
Yeah, thank you. A great callback to an important
Yeah.
part of yesterday's conversation. Yensi, you were nodding, so you definitely have something to say about this.
Yes, about that. That was actually a topic that was discussed a lot. And in the document, there is a phrase that says that we encourage science to be open, but also close as necessary sometimes for that protection, because sometimes we need to protect the data for individuals, for example. And it's not only in the case of indigenous people, but also the individual person, so that the privacy is protected somehow. So that phrase was included there, and I think that in several organizations, this is already started to be considered. I know that in the European Commission, this has started to become a phrase, that sometimes you need to close some data to protect the individual. But at the end of the day, if it's done for the benefit of the public good, in benefit of the public good. And about the incentives, yes, you're right. We need to choose collaboration over competition. And at the end, have the policies that not only that will go hand in hand with the will of scientists to be open about publishing their data. And it's an emphasis that we need to choose on making an emphasis in the process of science, and the integrity of the scientific endeavor over any potential result, which can be positive or negative, regardless of what it is.
Thank you.
Yes.
Phoebe.
I would like to quickly say it's about balancing digital inclusion and equity with digital rights and online freedoms. You have to balance this. You need to be very careful when you are designing policies, and a careful design of policies is the digital policy framework of Europe. It's about inclusion, it's about equity, but it's also about protection. And let me, in half a second, say that all of this digitalization, open science, open data, AI, of course, and also our need to worry about generative AI, which is not too far down the time. So it's coming up in 5, 6, 7 years, and we have no regulation for that yet, which is scary at the moment. I think all of this ecosystem will be at its right place if we increase capacity of use. And capacity of use can be increased in 2 ways. First, education, upskilling, reskilling continues, even within the scientific groups. And of course, infrastructure, investments in infrastructure. So the policies are going to safeguard this ecosystem, But at first, you really need to seriously invest in upskilling, reskilling, in true education, starting from the very early stages of education to the research level, on the new technologies, on how you do open science, you create the culture of open science, and of course, infrastructure. Infrastructure that, of course, respects the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. Thank you for your response. And even if it's implied, I would like it if I love it if the care principles could be mentioned like more explicitly, so that we can mention ethics, responsibility, the collective that where Mitsunobu was talking before, because not everyone's thinking in the same frame of reference, and having it explicit will be maybe much more useful towards that goal. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's a very actionable recommendation, and I'm seeing a lot of nodding. So thank you for your question. Time is slipping away from us, but we do have one final question, so please.
Hi, I'm Brinda, and I'm a research scholar at University of Delhi. And my question is that we are talking about open science, we are talking about science becoming a common public good. But in today's time, when the geopolitical tensions are so high, how far do you see this becoming an actual reality?
Very challenging question to end with, but a very pertinent one, because we are talking open science policy frameworks, but these do not develop in isolation. There were already in the presentations references to AI, but also bigger policy debates, research security, global tensions, competitiveness in Europe is a big topic. These all shape the space that is available to open science policy frameworks. Hoping for some quick comments from my panelists. Maybe Phoebe, if you have a comment there.
Very quickly, obviously, geopolitical pressures are increasing. We have a collapse of the one polar leadership that brought or tried to bring everybody in unity. However, with my engagement with the UN and the different regional coalitions, I feel that we are moving fast to a transformation, a big transformation in the leading nations. Let's say a lot is happening in Asia. And to cut a long story short, I will just say that it's gonna be a coalition of the willing. So we know what we want. We want the SDGs, we want inclusiveness, we want equity, we want the global south on board. And we know now that unless we achieve this in science, in society, in the economy, we cannot get on a sustainable development pathway, meaning that we cannot guarantee our future on this planet. Our social future, our economic future, our ecosystem future. So given geopolitical pressures, we also see a lot of very interesting, powerful coalitions being shaped. And it's going to be the era of the coalitions of the willing and the deep recognition that together we stand, alone we have no future.
Yensi, final comments?
So I guess that we are in a very difficult time right now, and it is challenging for everyone working in the multilateral system and scientists as well in different countries. We're under attack of a lot happening today. But I think that for that very reason, we have to stand up and we have to be there, and we have to be a force driving change, to support multilateralism and evidence-based policy. so that we can drive all the change that Phoebe just mentioned right now, you know. So I think the time isn't the best right now to be in this situation, but for that same reason, we need to be strong and uphold to our principles.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is a great sentiment to end the panel with. I want to thank both of my panelists. I'd like to ask for a big applause for the panelists, please. Yes. Thank you for your contributions. Great start to the day. We have also learned, among the many things we've learned about open science policy frameworks, unfortunately also learned life is not a movie. The doors didn't fly open, the first speaker didn't walk in. We are going to follow up with him, of course. I'm sure he sends his apologies. So that being said, Megs, I am going to give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Bregt, and thank you as well to you, to our speakers, to folks for their questions. I agree, this room, I mean, has such wonderful doors to fly open, so maybe we'll have an opportunity for that later today. So it is now time to take a 15-minute break, stretch your legs, take a breath of fresh air. And so if we could please return to this room no later than 11:25, we will resume at that time. Thank you so much, everyone.